I'm Andrea Lipinski.
And I'm Keith DeCandido, and we're back with another episode of The Chronic Rift. Tonight we're going to be following in the tradition of past episodes like Frankenstein, the first science fiction novel, Play-by-Mail games, the alternative comic book. We're going to tell you about something you may not have known about before. Tonight we've got three people from the Society for Creative Anachronism to tell us just what that's all about. That's later on the roundtable discussion.
Attention, David Lynch fans. The pilot episode of Twin Peaks has been re-released on video with 15 minutes of additional footage that should explain a little more of the mystery of Laura Palmer. And now here with his Comics Corner is our very own Keith DeCandido.
Hello, and welcome once again to the Comic Art Commentary, where I give you some commentary about comic art. Last week, I said I would answer the question, what does it mean now that Chris Claremont has left the X-Men? The answer is absolutely nothing. The X phenomenon has gotten far too big for any one writer's departure to mean anything, even though that one writer is the guy who really made it popular in the first place. Claremont's been writing the Uncanny X-Men since 1975, and the consistency of his vision is part of what made the book so appealing in the first place. Now, however, there are 7 X books with new material. Claremont was only writing 2 of them. What Claremont has left behind is a great marketing tool for Marvel. All 7 books are still consistently top sellers, but a creative wasteland. The Uncanny X-Men and the new adjectiveless X-Men book, which Claremont was writing, are now being written by Jim Lee and John Byrne collaboratively. Both are past co-plotter artists with Claremont on the X-Men. Byrne is an overrated writer who gets far more credit for talent than he deserves, and he also has this tendency to, you'll pardon the pun, burn out after about 10 issues and then leave. Lee has never written before. He's an unknown quantity. X-Force, formerly the New Mutants, and Excalibur both have their artists taking on writing duties, Rob Liefeld for X-Force and Alan Davis for Excalibur. Liefeld, like Lee, is an unproven talent as far as writing goes, and Davis has written stuff before, but none of it was very good. X-Factor is being written by Peter David, and David is probably the most talented writer of the bunch. The problem is the book. X-Factor was originally created as a marketing tool to cash in on the X-craze, but the format has never lasted for more than about 6 to 12 issues or so. They're constantly retooling it, and they did it again for David's arrival. Wolverine is being written by Larry Hama. Hama is one of those pro-violence NRA types, and it shows in his writing, and he isn't a good enough writer for that not to be bothersome. Marvel Comics Presents is an anthology comic by various writers, little 8 to 11 page stories, in which various X characters appear. Superheroes have never worked in dinky little 8 to 11 page formats. DC's Action Comics Weekly didn't work. Marvel's Strange Tales didn't work. This is only alive because a decision was made to revive flagging sales to make it all mutant characters. So it has sort of riding on the coattails of that. This whole thing is probably going to collapse on Marvel in about 2 years. Claremont was smart to get out when he did. This week's Comics in Review are Innovation's comic book versions of the TV shows Lost in Space and Quantum Leap. The two have very much in common. They are both based on popular SF TV shows. They are both 12-issue series with different writers coming on periodically. Both first issues were 3 months late, coming on the stands, and both first issues are really, 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 really bad. Lost in Space captures some of that show's feel, the sense of family and the weirdness of the setting, but it oozed out all the late 60s daffy charm and chintziness that made the show so appealing in the first place. It's a couple of years since the last episode of Lost in Space, and Penny and Judy Robinson have hit puberty. Artists Eddie Newell and Mark Jones show cleavage at every opportunity and constantly have them in these slinky, sexy poses. It's the Malibu Graphics Incorporated style of putting out comics. Put 2 big boobs on it, the kids will eat it. Quantum Leap has Sam Beckett leaping into a white female teacher in Atlanta Inner City High School of 1968. He has to help the kids pass. You never see the process by which Sam does this. Part of Quantum Leap's appeal is watching how Sam solves a problem, especially if it's something he's not trained in. He has no experience teaching high school, yet we're supposed to believe that he can do it better than the person he's leapt into who is trained to do it. It doesn't wash, and we never see how he does it. All the scenes where he teaches are done in a sort of flash-forward soundbite style, so you don't know what he did to accomplish this. The next issue has him on death row, which has already been done in the TV series. However, that issue will be written by lawyer Robert Ingersoll, so it might be interesting. The art on both books has the same problem, and it's the same problem as all of Innovation's books, a coloring process that involves watercolor that gives the book a kind of fuzzy gloss. It's hideous. It makes it really hard to follow the story, and in Lost in Space, this is fatal, as the script is almost completely incomprehensible and you have no idea what's going on anyway, so it doesn't pick up the slack left by the bad art. Both will, as I said, have different writers on it as it goes along, so there might be improvement. My suggestion is you read it on the rack before plunking down your hard-earned $2.50 for it. Lost in Space and Quantum Leap are both 12-issue series from Innovation, 24 pages an issue, $2.50 an issue, and available at comic shops everywhere. That's it for Comic Art Commentary this week. Next week, I will be taking a look at Charles Burns' latest graphic novel. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
And now it's time to take a look at what's on television with Orenthal V. Hawkins and his couch potato salad.
Hi, I'm Orenthal Hawkins, and welcome to the very first edition of Couch Potato Salad, where I'll be discussing television from a couch potato's point of view. First up, we have a couple of animated masterpieces. There are a couple of cartoons. Couch potatoes love cartoons. The first of these cartoons is Bobby's World, a cartoon about the life and times of 4-year-old Bobby Generic.
That's generic!
Okay, excuse me. Generic. A kid with a healthy imagination, heavily influenced by television. Much of the humor in the show comes from Bobby trying to figure out how the adult mind works. These attempts are often shown through trips into Bobby's imagination.
In the house. Why do parents always want to know how many times they've yelled at us? I'll take getting in trouble for 200.
Bobby Generic.
Generic.
So, generic. The answer is 65. What is the question?
How many times has Mom told Bobby not to run in the house?
That's right there now, young man.
Adding to Bobby's confusion are his father, voice of Howie Mandel, who also provides the voice of Bobby, his mother, who says, "Gee darn, don't you know a lot," his teenage sister Kelly, a like valley girl, his preteen brother Derek, who is overly fond of the word dork, and his uncle Ted, a boy in a man's body. Bobby's World is a unique cartoon experience because the hero of the story isn't on a magical quest, doesn't have superpowers, or battle world-conquering villains. Instead, the hero is a kid, just growing up. Like the ads say, somewhere between the real world and the cartoon world is Bobby's World. Do yourself a favor and visit this world on Fox, Saturday mornings at 8:30. But wait! There's more! Toxie's back, and Tromaville's got him. Ably assisted by his Toxic Crusaders, No Zone, he of the Big Schnoz, Major Disaster, the Plant Master, Headbanger, the two-headed mad scientist Surfer Dude, and Bonehead, the dog that walks like a man. These hideously deformed creatures of superhuman size and strength fight against the evil Dr. Killamoff, the part cockroach alien from the planet Smugula, who wants to pollute the world so that he may rule. Yes, see the Toxic Crusaders make silly puns. Watch them protect the environment. See them spoof every hero cliche in the book. Gape as they break the fourth wall and talk directly to you, the viewer. See them actually acknowledge they're in a cartoon. You'll laugh. You'll cry. You'll enjoy yourself greatly if you watch the Toxic Crusaders. They're gross, but they still get girls. That's all for this edition of Couch Potato Salad. Next time I'll be talking about the television season's cult hits and misses. I'm Orenthal Hawkins. Later, Tater.
Webster's International Dictionary of the English Language defines an anachronism as, quote, a person, event, or idea that is incongruous with a particular time. For example, the Yankee in Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Today, there is a group dedicated to reenacting events of medieval and Renaissance times, the Society for Creative Anachronism. These are the people responsible for the Renaissance fairs held throughout the country. Founded in 1966, the SCA preserves the ideas of the Middle Ages by, among other activities, dressing in period clothes, singing period songs, reenacting medieval combat, and medieval feasts.
It's medieval.
What? With Keith and me to discuss and explain this group are, on my right, Sondra Venable, known in the SCA as Alexandra, a graduate student and adjunct professor. Next, Ted Dillenkofer, known in the SCA as Oswald, an MIS director for Letraset. And on the far left, Veda Crewe, known in the SCA as Morwina, an artist and museum technician. So Ted.
Yes.
Why the Middle Ages?
Why the Middle Ages?
Yep.
Well, the Middle Ages is a period in time when most people, to our way of thinking, were larger than life. They had different morals, better morals, more chivalric attitude about life. Events happened that could not possibly happen today. And it's just a fantastic time to be able to be something other than what you are today and now. You can be a hero, you can be, you can go and slay a dragon or woo a beautiful woman.
With
and
class.
That's why the Middle Ages.
That always helps. But the term is sort of anachronism, where which sort of is a more general term, and yet it keeps winding up back, and a lot of it is very medieval and Renaissance oriented. Is that why? Is there something about that particular thing that draws you to it?
Well, for me personally, a lot of it's the combat and the, as you saw a couple minutes ago, the ability to use things like this, dress in alternative clothing, and actually be the person that's inside. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Middle Ages, but the Middle Ages is the particular vehicle that I use. Morwina and Alexandra may have different reasons for doing that, but that's mine.
There's an opening if ever I heard one.
Yeah. No, for me it's dressing up. For me it started out with the whole idea, the romance of the courtly love and the idea of being a lady, having a knight fighting for you. It's just transcending the kind of nitty-gritty reality of the way our world is now, and doing something that can be sort of pure and beautiful with elegant pageantry and costumes and being something special.
Something I hadn't thought of. It also has a sort of singles bar appeal in that sense.
Yeah.
Refrain from comment.
No, it's just something that comes to mind.
But it's also a great creative outlet. The number of things that many of us do, arts and science-wise, we make our garb. The people make their armor. We do calligraphy, illumination, all kinds of things. And so there's a lot of room to be expressed, and lots of people who do all kinds of things you can learn from. Anything you want to know how to do, there's going to be somebody around who knows. Even if you just walk up to somebody and say, "Wow, that's a really neat dress. Did you make that? When did somebody wear that? Tell me about this." And they'll talk your ear off. People are very giving about information and skills and things.
There's Marion Zimmer Bradley was part of the original group who founded it, and she made a comment at one point about how she feels in some ways it's sort of a Frankenstein at this point, from what it was when it originally started. Do you think it's sort of gotten too big for its britches at this point? Or?
Yes and no. It has changed. It has grown. Sometimes I look at things and, some of us sit around. I've been doing this for about 15 years, and some of us will sit around and, talk about the good old days of the Pennsic War when there were, 500 or 600 people. Last year there were 7,000.
A lot of interest.
It's interesting. And certainly the SCA has become things that, the founders did not necessarily intend it to be. There's a tension, for example, between our roots are both in the historical Middle Ages and also in the 19th century Romanticism. It comes as much out of Tennyson and Kipling and Puck of Pook's Hill and all of that, and Tolkien, as it does
Howard
out
Pyle.
of Chaucer and Shakespeare and the Song of Roland. As we've grown, we've gotten a lot more scholarly people who are into emphasizing the real Middle Ages, and other people kind of get their backs up about that, saying, well come on, we want romance and glory and chivalry and larger than life. What's this nitpicking little, wait a minute, is that authentic?
That's not period.
So
Is that period?
For the most part,
Period.
yes.
It's not period to ask whether it's period.
So let's, yeah.
Well, for myself, I recognize the romantic roots, and that's as much a part of the SCA culture as you know, the real stuff, quote unquote. I'm interested in the real stuff, but I'm not going to be too nitpicky about it.
I think what most of us do to hit a middle ground is if you're interested in doing things that are really authentic, do them very authentically. Veda's costume, for instance, if you look at the embroidery and the work in it, it's like letter perfect. Okay, what I have on is pretty close. The jacket on the outside is something that actually existed. The shirt is a little bit later in period, but I'm also not wearing what might be called tights or particularly period shoes. So you have to do things for yourself and not try and inflict, your beliefs on others.
Well, you can really nitpick because to him this looks perfectly period, but I know exactly how period it really is.
Yeah.
Because I know that this is cotton and it might have been linen, and I know that I took the embroidery designs from the Book of Kells, Celtic Illumination, and translated that into embroidery. And there's plenty of reason to believe that they would have done that, but there's no extant garment that does this that I can say, well, see, they did this here. So there's always a little conjecture going on. It's very hard to do something that is absolutely all, straight down the line as authentic as possible.
Yeah, it's hard.
And we don't try to age anything. So we're, so what we've been looking at in museums, it's not going to look like that. You make something, like Sondra will make a scroll. There'll be, the calligraphy and illumination, and she'll use the same pigments, the same technique. They have the whole medieval mindset in how she goes about it, but the end result is going to look like those looked when they were made, not,
They look 500 years later.
right. So it's going to look fresh. It's going to look a little, not quite what you would expect.
So what are some of the other things that you do other than fighting and feasting?
Personally, I do lots of embroidery, and I'm really interested in costuming, and I've been doing a fair amount of leather tooling. I brought this belt along just to show a little more example of that. This is a Celtic knotwork design, traditional style with a Celtic dog, so it actually was made to go with this gown. However, I am Mistress Alexandra's apprentice, and this is her coat of arms on the end of this belt, and her colors, which is an indication that I belong to her. It's a medieval sort of thing to do.
Yes.
And while I am her apprentice, I will be wearing this belt. When I am no longer her apprentice, I will wear any belts that I choose. Also, I'm very interested in the bardic tradition and storytelling, singing songs, playing instruments, and writing poetry. And there's in our area there is the East Kingdom College of Bards, which I'm trying to get going, and more people involved and that sort of thing. And we do meet once a month in New York to sing and tell stories. But Oz can tell you about more other things. I mean, that's what I do.
Yeah.
He does other things too.
For instance, I do bookbinding and woodworking. So I've gone back and done research in the materials used in books and how you sew them.
Paper was completely different also.
Oh, a little bit. It wasn't run out on web presses and all that. It was all done by hand and in decals. And, it's very different. Woodworking, obviously, all by hand sharpened.
You can't really use an electric lathe, I guess.
No. I do cheat a little bit, though. I use cut-off saws and things, and then I use planes to do the final finishing, but I'm not going to spend hours and hours and hours. Again, it's this thing of making,
some kind of
a compromise, yeah. Sandra, on the other hand, doesn't do that.
Well, yes and no. Most of my, I'm a scribe. Most of my calligraphy I do with metal pens. Although I've been playing with cutting quills, and there are certain aspects of medieval letters that really work better with a quill. I mean, there's a reason for this. I'm learning to work on vellum. I mix my own paints. I sew most of my own garb, and I do it on a sewing machine. the fact is that we all do this as a hobby. Most of us are employed doing other things full time. So you have to kind of fit this in when you can. There's kind of two aspects. There's the things that we do at events when we all get together as a group and hang out together, which is where you get the feasting and the tournaments and dancing. Dancing's great. Neat stuff like that. Sometimes we have universities where
Eating's great.
Eating's good too, yes.
Well, it's general. I mean, just as a rule.
One without the other.
Food, by the way, can be absolutely terrific.
Yes.
We're absolutely
Not all
heinous,
venison.
There's good and bad cooks, as
Just
there
like
are
that.
everywhere. But, and then there's the other things that we do sort of to prepare for events, like making the costumes and, doing the scrolls that get given out at court and practicing, plays or songs and all of the preparatory stuff that goes into it, which to many people is at least as important as going to the events, the time that you put into doing the stuff. But the events give you a chance to show it off to an appreciative audience.
I'm curious about what you said about being an apprentice. How serious is that? And also, what are you apprenticing her in?
All right. This thing means that I'm a mistress of the laurel. The laurel is an award equivalent to being knighted. It makes me a peer of the realm. It's given for achievement in the peaceful arts, one or more. In my case, for calligraphy predominantly, and also illumination. And as knights take squires, mistresses of the laurel, since I'm considered what in guild terms would be a master craftsman, I'm therefore entitled to take apprentices. And I have 3. I'm willing to teach anyone that comes to me, and I hold classes at my place regularly. But the apprentices are people that I think will do very well at this, who are particularly interested in, and people that I can get along with. That's important. People that I want to spend time with and work with. So what it means is, we have a contract. She's apprenticed to me to learn, as it states, the mysteries of the arts of calligraphy and illumination. And it's a contract where I agree to teach her and she agrees to study, and that's kind of what it means. But it means that I will give her formal assignments and expect her to complete them and just sort of guide her along and teach her other things and bring her up in the ways of the SCA, and then, this is a acculturator, and this is how we do things here.
It's also, she is sort of a mentor overlooking all of the projects I'm doing, because obviously I'm doing more than calligraphy and illumination, and so she is teaching me what it is to be a peer. So it goes beyond just learning of the technical skill or something like that.
Similarly, when a knight takes a squire, he's supposed to be teaching him how to be a knight. That means, in addition to being able to use this stuff, being able to dance, play chess, sing a song, exhibit all the courtly graces.
All while wearing armor.
No, but to dress well and keep yourself well and be a knight. We also have a service award called the Pelican, because pelicans, to feed their young, will prick their breast and feed their young their blood. And people who bleed for the society get this. And they take protégés and teach them the same kind of things. But it comes down to how to act and how to behave. Because we try and live by a very different code than that holds today. We try and live very chivalrously, which means having respect for other people.
It's one of the few places out of a religious context where you have something of a code of ethics and role models, standards to live up to.
And ceremony.
And ceremony.
Yes.
Without a lot of the angst that comes with religion.
Yeah, it's been my observation that a lot of the people in the SCA are not particularly practicers of religion. There are a lot of either atheistic or agnostic or merely non-practicing sorts of people, and I think this is not entirely accidental, as you'd say. It is no accident. I think it's because religion provides a certain level of ceremony and ritual and that structure in people's lives, and people who are not getting it from religion are perhaps more inclined to turn to the SCA as an alternate source. It's a theory. I don't know if it's true.
And in some ways, you could even almost see it as a substitute.
Yeah.
Because it has a lot of the ritual and the ceremony and the all that sort of neat trappings of religion without a lot of the parts about how you're going to go to hell and awful things will happen to you if you do things wrong. If you do things wrong, people will just sort of look at you funny, and that's about it.
That is one of the anachronistic aspects of this, though, that we do not have a religious. We do not have a religious base. We specifically we do not. It is not a religious organization, because in fact, in medieval history, the church was a pretty big deal. Right. So that is obviously something we're not trying to do.
Mm-hmm. This is the good part version of the Middle Ages.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. This was very informative, very interesting. Thank you all, especially for decking yourself out.
Yes. Sitting under the hot light.
Yeah.
What strange clothes you have on.
Yeah.
Are you in a play?
I feel underdressed. Please do not forget, we announced this 2 weeks ago, our contest. Write in, tell us you watched the show, and tell us you want to enter the contest. Send us a postcard with your name, address, and if you want an evening phone number, you will enter our contest and win all sorts of neat prizes. If you don't want to enter the contest, write anyway. We want you to write in and tell us you watched the show.
And the deadline is November 29th.
1991.
And our next episode, we're going to be discussing heroes and villains.
And we'll see you then.
Good night.
Good night.
This episode was sponsored in part by Comics Interview, the magazine where both the fans and the pros turn to see who's who and how it's done. Read Comics Interview number 100 and see who the 100 most powerful people in the comics industry are. For a free catalog, write to Comics Interview, 234 5th Avenue, Suite 301, New York, 10001. Omega Zone, a store specializing in comic books and video movie rentals, including science fiction, horror, animation, and cult films you won't find at your local video store. Now at a new location, 258 West 15th Street, between 7th and 8th Avenues, in Manhattan. Telephone 212-645-6941. Pick up the latest Omni at your local newsstand or call 1-800-289-6664 for subscription information.